Welcome everyone to our latest seminar on finances for emerging artists, and welcome financial advisor Tamara Bates.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Please do feel free to unmute yourself and ask me questions as I'm going through the slides. I definitely want everything to make sense to people, to be clear. If something isn't making sense, or even if you have an anecdote that you want to share, I do welcome your participation throughout. I am Tamara Bates. I'm calling in from Ogepoge, White Shell Water Place, Santa Fe, New Mexico, the perpetual home of the Tewa. So this talk is really just like a general, I call it like my soup to nuts financial literacy, kind of touching on a wide variety of topic building blocks. Just how can you start kind of taking charge of your financial life? So one of the important things is to know where your money is going. Again, that sounds very straightforward, but not that many of us have sat down and gone through 3 to 6 months of bank statements to figure out exactly which of our expenses are discretionary, where we have some control over it, and what are the fixed expenses. So that goes into figuring out your needs number. And knowing your needs number is one of the most important things to help you create a plan and even help you figure out, in some cases, like what you need to be charging for your art, for consulting work, knowing the number that you have to spend every single month. So this is food, utilities, housing, transportation, if you have children, childcare, health insurance. If you have student loan debt, the minimum payment on your student loan debt or credit card debt goes into this needs number. The recommendation, of course, is that everybody have some kind of emergency fund. And while most of us, it can be very difficult to save that 3 to 6 months of the recommended amount of, again, this is like your needs cost. It might not be everything that you spend in the month, but at least what you have to spend. But just start even by saving 1 month of your needs number. Of course, pay off high interest debt first. And again, while this may sound simple, many of us aren't even sure like what interest we're being charged on different debts. So even like sitting down to figure that out. And then as soon as we can, investing in some type of retirement vehicle, an individual retirement account. If you do work somewhere that you're able to access a retirement plan through your work, but doing that as soon as you can. So I also like to point out a lot of what I'm about to talk about, right, is how things should work in an ideal setting. Of course, life doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way for me. It probably doesn't work that way for you. So I don't want any of this information to seem discouraging or to be overwhelming. Just the goal is that we kind of create a list of things that we're going to tackle, and we tackle them one at a time. My experience working with fellows that have gone through the dots between is that it takes people about 6 months to 2 years to address all the things that they kind of set out to do at the beginning of the program, as far as, you know, making a plan for their debt, opening their investment account, things like that. It does take time. So you've probably seen this breakdown before, but this is just something I like to share, that it's a pretty easy way to think about budgeting. And that this 50-30-20 was actually, Elizabeth Warren came up with this, I think in the late 90s or early 2000s. So that 50% of your take-home income is going to these needs. 30% is going to discretionary costs like eating out. And that 20% is creating this emergency savings fund, paying off debt above the minimum payment, and then funding some type of retirement vehicle. Again, those of us who live in big cities, and even now since COVID and housing costs have risen so much, it really might be 80-20, and 80% is your needs and wants, because 50% could be just your housing. And so again, I want, you know, this layout in some ways doesn't necessarily work the way that it used to, where people's housing was 30% or below 30% of their living expenses. So this is just a little bit more about what goes into these needs, wants, and future you. And here's just some tips if you're spending more than you make. I mean, a lot of times people want me to talk about budgeting and how to budget, but it's not that they're bad at budgeting, it's that they're not making enough money to really be able to complete all these buckets, to be able to save and pay down debt and invest for the future, right? So think about if you're not able to do those things, it may not be because you're spending your money the wrong way. It's just that you need to make more money. So in here, I put some tips for negotiating your raise. You will get access to these slides. Um, and so you'll be able to open all these links. I really like this real cost budgeting exercise, which is something that Creative Capital shared with me. And it's a good way about like figuring out how much your life costs, and so how you can what you need to be charging like per hour, per day, per month. And probably most of you on this call are familiar with. So it's something that you can go see like what different um, people are charging for different work, like in museums, doing music gigs, performing, and also by location. And the whole goal is to make artist work more transparent, how people get paid and what people should be paid. So here's some strategies for paying down debt. And this really refers to credit card debt and not student loan debt. So again, this is about understanding how much interest are you paying on different things. Are you able to move credit card debt to a zero interest credit card? And then just make a plan where you're kind of listing all your debts, and you can either do it where you're paying off the highest interest first, and you're putting any extra money towards the debt that has the highest interest rate, and you keep putting extra money until that kind of top debt is paid off. The other method is that you actually pay versus something that has the smallest balance. So the benefit of this is that sometimes psychologically it feels better just to have one debt completely off the table before you start tackling the rest of them. The disadvantage is that you will pay more interest in the long term. I do recommend having a separate savings account. Probably most of you or many of you on this call have an LLC, and you may have a separate business account and a checking account, but I also recommend having a separate personal savings. You may even, depending on how things are structured, you might want to have even a business savings, right? So if you have kind of like a long-term artistic practice goal where you know you're going to need supplies and materials, or maybe you have to hire a contractor, that you're setting aside money for that. So I do, again, recommend automating it, where you're just kind of saying, okay, every month on the 15th, I'm moving $50 to this account, or I'm moving $100 to this account, or even $25 to this account. Over time, it really will add up.
You mentioned having separate accounts. So like I understand, so I understand the need for separate accounts, but maybe you should explain it. And then the
Okay.
follow-up question is there a difference from an artist who's making money, let's say an artist that makes enough money to pay taxes versus an artist that isn't making any money? Should they also have separate accounts?
So,
What?
I mean, I think, again, part of it also is the way your brain works and what your goals are and what's going to work for you. For some people that I have worked with, they know if they see extra money in an account that they're going to spend it. So it doesn't matter if they have a business, if they don't have a business, for them, they need some way of like separating that money out so that they will be able to, have savings, but also maybe achieve some other goals that they might have. And so you don't have to have separate accounts. What I'm recommending is um, if you have these goals, again, like saving for the emergency fund, or if you have a project that you want to accomplish, or let's say you're planning on having children, it can be a very helpful tool to have a separate savings account where you're putting money aside for these kind of longer term goals. This is apart from having an investment account where you're saving like for longer term, again, for retirement, and we'll get to that later. Um, the other piece, as far as like what I recommend right now too, up until the last year or so, you couldn't really earn interest on your cash. Now you can. And so now it really pays to have a savings account where you might be earning 4.5 or 5%. And you can go to nerdwallet.com and type in highest earning savings accounts, and they will show you a list of what you can earn on your cash right now. And this is also something I recommend. Again, like let's say you were saving to buy a house, but you can't find the right house to buy. There's not enough housing stock available, but you're sitting on all this cash. You don't want to invest it because your dream house might pop up, right? But if you can be earning 4.5, 5, maybe even 5.25% on that cash, I do recommend that you do that. If you are an artist with an LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Corporation, which I do recommend that you set up, especially if you're someone who's going to be hiring anybody else to work on your projects, having an LLC can be an important protective factor for you. Even if you're just hiring contractors to help you do murals, I saw somebody on here as a mural artist, or if you're a sculptor or something like that, you're going to want to have an LLC. And if you have an LLC, you really should have a separate business account because it's just going to be much easier to do your taxes if you're running all of your profits and expenses through an LLC. Okay, so this is a slide. Um, what I've seen a lot of times, again, with people who you have a goal to save, but things that might be preventing you from saving, having student loan debt. So I just have some links on here to different things. Like also, a lot of times I've seen people have tax issues, like they didn't pay their taxes for many years, and maybe they owe for several years in a row. I've also seen a lot of situations where people have gotten into debt because of medical bills. So I have a link in here about different things that you can do to negotiate your medical debt. Different things you can think about also if you're in a position, like a lot of people who are in their 30s to 50s are in this position where they're trying to save for themselves, they're trying to save for family, older family members who maybe didn't save enough, and then they also might have children. And so like navigating all these different things can be really challenging. And if anybody wants to weigh in on any of those right now, please do. Is there any? This one, I would think I like to talk about it because I have found that this generally applies to someone, even if it's one of your friends. So it can be really difficult if you were only making 1099 income, again, income where you're a contractor, they're not taking taxes out. It can be very challenging to qualify for a mortgage. It's not impossible, but it's hard. So I'm saying like there's nothing lenders love more than like a stream of predictable income. So especially if you're a first time home buyer, um, there's almost always a program in your state or city. So go to your city or your state's website and the housing department and look up what types of programs there are for first time home buyers. The other thing that can be really helpful, again, this is for somebody who has like all 1099 income. Um, that you do keep your deductions down for 2 years, because the lenders are going to look at, after expenses, what your income is. And so you're going to want to show, like, let's say you normally make 60,000, but you claim 20,000 in expenses. So you're showing an income of 40,000. Just the recommendation is, if you want to qualify for a home, especially a home that's going to be, $350,000 plus, you need to show a bigger income in order to get that mortgage. So keeping your deductions down for 2 to 3 years, paying down debt, and increasing your credit score. And also, you might want to save money for a larger down payment. Understanding your credit score. This is also a topic that I'm not going to do a deep dive in unless there's someone who really wants me to. Other than, I'll say in general, if you are trying to get a mortgage, you're going to want a credit score of 740 at least. I mean, that's going to, anything over 700, you're going to get a better mortgage rate. Same thing probably is true if you're looking at doing a car loan or something like that. On this slide, this has the link to writing a medical provider a goodwill letter to try and pay off debt. It is something that I recommend that you try to negotiate. If there's any medical debt that you owe, or even other debt, that you do try to negotiate with the lender to get your debt down. It works more often than you might think. These other topics, things that people ask me about a lot of times, that maybe if you're moving in with someone or you're looking at getting married, how to discuss money with a partner. It's still really holding true that in relationships, a lot of times one person just hands off kind of the long-term decision making about money. And so what I normally see doesn't necessarily matter the gender orientation of the couple, but one person will manage the bills and kind of the day-to-day household finances, and another person will handle these more long-term issues. The problem is, when both people aren't kind of participating, especially in the long-term decision making, you can just set yourself up for like a lot of bad surprises if the relationship breaks up, like that you didn't know about. Maybe things not invested the way that you thought that they would be. Another area where I've seen a lot of people fall on financial hardship themselves is because they're paying, again, for their parents, maybe parents who didn't save for burial costs. I've worked with artists who've had to file bankruptcy because they're paying for people's funerals. So even though this is a difficult conversation to have, it's very good to know, do your parents have medical power of attorney? So of course, you don't even necessarily have to get into, have you done a will? Have you done a trust? Do you know what's happening with your money? But what happens with people, and where a lot of arguments and things can go wrong, is like when you're alive, but you're incapacitated, right? And someone has to make decisions on your behalf. And I recommend that everybody have healthcare directives and have a medical power of attorney. And so with your parents or older people in your life, you want to make sure that if they do have a medical power of attorney, and if that person is you, that you have a copy. And so you know what it says and what they want. So I put some links in here to how you have that conversation, and also like what kind of goes into those medical care directives. So now I'm just going to jump into, again, this idea that the earlier that you start investing for the future, the better off you'll be. And this is investing. This isn't putting money in a savings account in the bank. This is investing in stocks and bonds in the stock market, preferably in, like I said, some type of individual retirement account or other tax advantaged account like a 401k or 403b. This just shows starting 10 years earlier, this person ends up with almost twice as much money, even though they're saving $5,000 a year. And this is because of compound interest. Um, this also doesn't mean, though, that if you're in your 40s or 50s and you haven't started yet, that it's too late. So it's not too late as long as you're working and you plan to work for another 7 to 10 years. I recommend that you take advantage of putting money away in an investment account, retirement account. This chart just basically this graph shows the same thing that the other one did, but in a table version. So just the sooner that starting in age 20, you don't have to save as much. Again, this is getting to $1 million in retirement accounts by age 65. Now I would probably up that to age 70, but this is kind of the recommendation is that people have $1 million invested in order to supplement Social Security and maybe other income. And this $1 million number might seem unattainable or unrealistic, but it's actually, if you're in your 20s, 30s, even late 30s, doing the IRA contribution, which this year is 7,000, 2023 is 6,500. Doing that every year for decades, you will get to $1 million or very close.
I know, like for me, investing was really scary for a long time, and
Yeah.
like where do you put money and all that. And I don't know
Yeah.
if you're gonna get into it, but I recently found out that so they're doing a lot more like robot guided investing for
Yeah.
like low fees, and so like
Yes.
Vanguard I know has like for like $3,000 like minimum buy-in. They do all the investing for you, and
Yeah.
you just tell them if you're going to be really risky or really risk averse, and then
Yeah.
you just sort of set it and forget it.
Yes. And that is what I recommend doing robo advising, doing a low cost provider like Betterment, Elvest, Fidelity, Vanguard. My talk in March goes into those much more and also goes into more detail around like how you answer those risk questionnaires that you were just referring to. It may not have. I mean, I don't recommend that people stock pick. I do. I
Well, I
recommend
picked
that.
like
Yeah.
a grouping,
Okay, a
you
group.
know.
Yes. So great. So that is something if you're doing like S&P 500 ETF, which stands for Exchange Traded Fund, but you're doing a basket of stocks. So maybe though, just kind of normally if you're just starting out to put money away, um, and again, you have an amount under $7,000 to put, you're going to look at doing one of these IRAs. And I do recommend putting money in an IRA versus just a taxable account because the government has created tax advantages for these to incentivize people to save for retirement. So the main difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, the traditional IRA is going to help reduce your taxable income. You're going to pay fewer taxes. The Roth IRA is after tax money. It's not going to help you on your taxes. But Roth IRA is one of the things that I recommend that everybody should have because it's the only tax-free thing that Congress has ever authorized. So when you pull the money out, you're not taxed on it. I also recommend a Roth, even if, yes, we all like to pay fewer taxes. The issue, though, with a traditional IRA, especially if you don't have an emergency savings fund with several months in it, if this is your kind of savings money and you have an emergency and you need to pull money out of your traditional IRA and you're under 59 and a half, you will pay a 10% penalty and you're going to pay income tax on whatever amount you pull out. And that'll basically wipe out like any growth that you might have experienced. With a Roth, because it's after tax money, Uncle Sam already got their cut. They're much less concerned about it. You can pull the money out for any reason if it's been in there longer than 5 years. If it's been in there fewer than 5 years, there's a list of like 10 reasons that you can pull it out, like medical, again, for an emergency, for education, 10% for a first time home purchase. The only thing that you may ever have to pay on this money, if it's been in there fewer than 5 years and there's been gains, you may have to pay capital gains tax. Um, Both of these are going to grow tax free. There's no taxes on buying and selling within the accounts. And that's why I kind of recommend starting out with one of these if you're going to invest for the long term versus starting out with what's called a taxable account, which just means it's not in a retirement vehicle. The other thing I want to say about these, because this can be confusing for people who haven't invested yet, the IRA is the container. So it's like the basket. The IRA is not the investment. So the fruits and vegetables go in the basket, and the stocks and bonds are what go in the IRA. So a lot of times I've seen people put money, they fund an IRA, but they don't pick anything to go in that basket. But they didn't realize it. And they think that it's growing, but actually your money is just sitting in cash. I also want to point out, because this happens very often, if you have a rollover, so let's say you had a 401k at a job, you left that job, you decide to roll that money into an individual retirement account, just make sure that that money then gets invested. And again, I recommend doing like a robo advisor model where they're picking the investments. More often than not, I've seen people roll their money into an IRA, even at the same firm. I saw this happen at Fidelity, and they didn't invest it. And you could go years without realizing that. And all that would mean is that you lost out on like several years of growth if your money is just sitting in cash. I just want to say one more thing, but your eyes might be glazing over. I can't tell because you don't have your screens on, but just because this is such a big deal and I don't want this to happen to anybody, sometimes when they do the rollover and your money's in cash, you might pull up your account to look at it, and it says it's in something like FTMX. It has a stock symbol, but it's actually in a money market that is a cash equivalent, but it can have a stock symbol because a money market. And again, I've seen people go 10 years with like having their money sitting in cash, and it's not what you want, and then it's not
A lot
growing,
of,
and it defeats the purpose of having it in there.
I would say a lot of these places do have people that you can call, and they will, they're
Yes,
not like full. They're not going to tell you like pick these stocks or something, but
right.
they'll tell you this is sitting in cash, you're getting 4%, and think about putting it in a market fund, or think about
Yes.
putting it in an event. Talk to somebody.
Yes, talk to somebody, but I guess my point is, don't think that if they don't tell you that it's fine, because
Yeah.
this is what I've seen is that nobody told this. No, this was an artist, who worked for a tech company. I think she had $85,000. It wasn't a small amount. Nobody told her it was sitting in cash. If she hadn't happened to be in the dots between and she hadn't pulled up her account and screen shared it with me, she probably would have gone 10 years without knowing. So yes, call the person. If you do a rollover, call the person. Just ask, make sure that it's going into something that they recommend or that you pick. Um, this order of saving a windfall, this came up a lot also during COVID when we were getting checks from the government. Um, I also get this question asked a lot when people maybe receive a large grant. So this is money, it could be an inheritance, but it's basically just a lump sum of money that's coming to you. And you say, okay, I've never had $50,000 at one time, for example, whatever amount it is. It could be $2,000, but it's a windfall. You weren't expecting it. What's the order of what you should do with it? And so this, I think, is kind of a helpful, making sure you have that emergency fund, um, and saving for retirement. And then if you've done all those things and you've maxed out the kind of tax deferred options, then you can look at doing another type of investment, either saving more money in cash, again, that can be earning 5%, doing an after-tax brokerage account. This is when, if you really want to do crypto, I would say fine, do some crypto. If you want to invest in art, buy some art. A lot of times too, people ask me about paying off debt. And my note here is that paying off debt faster. So again, this is a situation where, let's say somebody has a mortgage, they receive a windfall, they say, should I pay my house down? My answer is make sure that you're still doing your retirement accounts and you're saving for the long term first before you pay extra on, again, paying a house down, or a student loan or something like that. Because paying debt down makes us feel better. But if we haven't put enough away every year for the long term, we're not going to have enough of that nest egg that we need when we're in our 70s, 80s, and 90s. Does anybody have a question about that? Here's links to my favorite tax people. I recommend going to their websites and signing up for their newsletters. Paco de Leon at the Hell Yeah Group, Hannah Cole at Sunlight Tax, and Elaine Grogan-Luttrell at Minerva Financial Arts. Hell Yeah, I think, is a weekly newsletter. Sunlight, depending on, she offers like a lot of different free resources throughout the year. And Elaine at Minerva also has some online courses that you can take that are specifically about when you might move from an LLC to having an S corp and some of these things. And each of these people also have different. I think Hell Yeah Group actually does people's taxes. It is a bookkeeping company. Sunlight Tax can do people's taxes. Elaine can consult with you one-on-one about your tax situation. She doesn't do taxes.
I have a question. I've put a lot of money into traditional over the years. There's no way to move it into Roth now? Or, I mean, it's just pretty much, I'm just stuck.
No, not necessarily. You have a couple different options.
Huh.
You could open a Roth account.
I do. I do have a
Okay.
Roth account. It just doesn't have much in it.
Okay. Here's what I recommend. Are you self-employed?
I was, but now I have I actually have a 401k. Like I just took
Okay.
a full-time job, so I don't have
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about just a couple different options. They're not all going to apply to you, but I just want to mention them. And I'm going into this more in the second talk. Let's pretend that you hadn't taken this full-time job with the 401k.
Okay.
What I recommend is that you can have a SEP IRA where you put 20% of your profits away after expenses. And then you can have a Roth. You can have a Roth and a SEP. And this is a really good solution for people who are 100% self-employed. For you, because you're doing the 401k now, there's a few different options. You can do all the 401k stuff, and then when you leave that job, you could decide to move some or all of that money into your Roth. You have to pay the taxes on it because you're going from a tax bucket to a non-tax bucket. So when I was at UBS, I have a Roth IRA. I don't have a regular. I took my 401k and I rolled it into my Roth, and I just bit the bullet and paid the taxes on that money that year. It's going to grow tax free for the next however long, right? Part of that depends on your age. You can always do what's called a backdoor Roth contribution, which sounds dirty, but it's not. Anyway.
Yeah, what is that?
You can move money from your regular IRA into your Roth in chunks. Again, you have to pay the taxes on it, but you could do that if you're trying to like put more money in this Roth bucket. So you could decide, and again, depending on how much money you're making every year and how many taxes you're already paying, You could say, I'm going to start moving 2,000 from my regular into my Roth every year. Those don't count as the contribution. It
Right.
is like a rollover.
Okay. So I can roll it over, but I have to pay like $2,000 a year.
No, I'm
Or,
saying you
I
could
have to pay
decide
tax
to,
on 2,000, whatever I
right,
roll over.
right. Whatever amount you roll over, you're going to have to pay the taxes on that at whatever tax bracket you're in.
But at least it's better than getting hit all at once when you retire, right? Like to like start rolling it over slowly.
It can be, yes.
Okay.
And you can sign up, like on my website, thedotsbetween.com. There's a little calendar link. People can sign up and just do 15 minutes with me for free to like go into a question like that. Or people can email me. My email is on the slide, on the first slide. And I'm happy to help walk you through different things. I don't want to give blanket advice about this because it's not a blanket situation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's my preference that I want to have a lot of money in this after-tax bucket. With a regular IRA, the IRS makes you start pulling it out at age 72 and a half. Now, for some people, they don't like having, and they make you pull it out on a percentage, like based on your life expectancy. Some people don't like having to pull the money out and pay taxes on it, especially if they didn't necessarily need that money to live on, because it can bump you up into a higher tax bracket. For most of us, that's not going to apply, but it's just something to consider. I also just, in general, I like to talk about the Roth because I have just seen so many situations where people have to pull the money of a traditional out early and they get hit with the penalty, especially when people are opening these in their 20s and 30s. 59 and a half is just too far away for me to say, like, I don't want people to also feel like their money is locked up that way. Oh, again, depending on your tax situation, maybe you have a year where, I mean, now you're at a full-time job, it's a W-2 job, they're taking the taxes out. This might be a good time for you to start moving money from one bucket to another. Because you have an employer who's paying half of your self-employment taxes.
Yeah.
I do want to show people this website and this calculator before we go. So I love this website and I like to point it out because it has a funny name and it looks a little weird, but it's legitimate. So it's stinkytown.net. And this is a great place to go if you're like, should I refinance my car? What should I do with my student loans? Let me make a plan to figure out paying down my credit card debt. The one I like is this retirement plan. Can everybody see it? Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not doing all this stuff and you can't see what I'm doing. Okay. So retirement planner calculator. So this is like a pretty quick and easy way for you to answer the question, am I doing what I need to do right now, again, to have enough put away so that I'm okay in my 70s, 80s, 90s? So I'm going to say this person's 30. They're going to stop working. And again, I know with artists, your dream most likely is not to play golf and like be doing nothing, right? That's not the goal. But I really want people to be saving money for the future because what I've seen so many times happen is that people have a health issue or a family member has a health issue and you have to either slow down or you have to stop working and there's not a choice. The other thing I see with artists is, especially if like maybe you're doing large scale painting, you're doing sculpture, you're doing things that are very physically hard on your body, you need to have this money set aside that you're adding to every year. Also, so that if you have to slow down or you just want to take a break. This doesn't mean that you're not doing your best work in your 70s and 80s. You're not having your MoMA retrospective, I mean, it doesn't mean you're not getting book royalties or music royalties or things like that. It just means that really everybody should be setting something aside for retirement, even if we think we will never retire, just because like healthcare costs are inflating at 11.5% right now. If you just have your money sitting in cash, you're going to be losing a little bit every year to inflation. Okay, I'll stop preaching. So this person has an income of 50,000. They're saving 15%. And they've already started. So they have 20,000 already in an IRA. They are expecting their income is going to increase. And this pre-retirement income, most people think they won't need as much money in older age. And again, if you own a home, maybe your home is paid off, maybe you are spending less. I like to say that people are going to spend 80% of what you're spending now when you're younger, working, running around. Okay. The other thing that makes things tricky is that we don't know how long we're going to live, right? So just feel free to run this for yourself using your own numbers. The other thing that can be really interesting is that being married and Social Security, they really play a big role in this too. The married part is because then it's counting a spouse's Social Security. So without these things, this person, their money is running out at age 79. With these kind of things in place, their money is not running out. So this is showing that this person's 30, they're putting this $6,000, they're putting basically the IRA contribution away for over 30 years. By the time they get to retirement age, they do have over $1 million invested. That's just doing the 6,500. So I just wanted to show you guys that.
Can I ask a question about pensions?
Yes.
So how do pensions play into this?
The pension is going to just be, you could run that retirement plan calculator, even like putting in what you know you might get from your pension.
Okay.
So they're designed differently, and it's, based on years of service. But with a pension, if you know you're going to be getting one, and then you can have the pension plan provider do what's called an illustration.
Mm-hmm.
And that shows how much money you would be getting per month or per year. You tell them how to run it, right? So I'm age X, I'm going to retire in 5 years. I want an illustration showing what my pension will be.
Right. And then that would also change, because some pensions you still get Social Security, some you don't. So like just
Correct.
depending,
Yes.
all the variables, right?
Yes. But you can run these plans where you can put in streams of income.
Okay.
I also have the software program that I had at UBS where I can put all of those things in and answer that question. And that's something I do. People pay me to do that, but I do have artist rates. So anyway, if you're interested, again, anybody can have a 15-minute, I usually talk to people longer than 15 minutes, but anybody can have a chat with me. We can talk about your specific questions. We can see if it makes sense for you to work with me or not. Most of the time I can answer people's questions there. 99% of the work I do for artists is free. My program, The Dots Between, is free. I founded it to help people with these items that I feel like no one really talks to artists about.
Would you also say, so in the world of financial planning for one's future, I guess at least in America, like owning property seems to be one of the big things that people think about. Like, what do you have to say about that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, either like
Having
invest,
real estate as an investment?
not investment.
You're just
Well,
talking about in general owning
I'm talking
property.
about or like trying
Yeah.
to own your home, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, owning your home can be, it's again, it's like very nuanced. There's not a like blanket, it used to be owning a home was the American dream. Everybody had to do it, right? I think when 2008 happened and a lot of people lost everything because they had gotten into homes that really they couldn't afford, or they got divorced and had to sell and their home was underwater. Owning real estate can be, if you don't, I just say you need to have a lot of other protections in place. I think if you're going to own a home, where you really do need to have that emergency fund, you need to make sure that you have some type of access to like a fairly low interest line of credit. That could be a home equity line of credit or some other line of credit because, you know, I mean, every place is different, right? In Santa Fe, the plumbing is horrible. Like every home I've owned, I've had to redo the sewer system, $20,000. It's not covered by insurance. The roofs here are terrible. You need to know that if you buy a home and like the mortgage is taking every penny that you have, you're putting yourself a little bit at risk. Also at risk of like getting into a lot of debt if you don't have money to cover those for a specific location. Part of it is too, again, it's the market. Like, are you going to stay? Do you plan to stay in a community for 7 to 10 years? Then you might want to own a home. If you like think you're going to move in 3 years, it's really a lot of times you could lose money. We're at a peak right now. We're at a time where it looks like, and it still looks like property is like the best possible investment. But 10 years ago, that was not true. If you look at over time, and this again is just talking about real estate as an investment, so a second property that's an investment property. Real estate versus the stock market, and we're talking about over 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, stock market always beats real estate. Other than like a couple key, let's say you bought Santa Monica beachfront 1940, right? So it's not cut and dry. I would just say if you're passionate about owning a home and you want to and you know you're going to stay, then yes. And I just like to point this out for people in general. What you want and what matters to you has a value and should be influencing your financial decisions, because I think a lot of times people just want to look at the money part, and we can't just look at the money part. Like what you want and what will make you feel happy and secure has a value too, even if we're not assigning a dollar value. And we need to respect that as we're.
This is for like really beginning level artists who are just starting out, just graduated from college. If you who aren't making, working at a coffee shop kind of money, right? If you had to prioritize their finances, right? Like as far as like saving, like if they're like barely getting by.
Yeah.
This is like quite like a hypothetical.
Yeah. Right. And that can be, it's really challenging. I mean, I'm still going to say starting early with some type of investment account, it could be $20 a month. I mean, so for somebody just starting out who doesn't have a lot of extra money, I would say move $5 a week, into a savings account and $10 to $25 a month into a Roth IRA at Fidelity or what, like if, something like that, or Betterment or Ellevest, or, there's a lot of low cost options. I'm not paid by any third party providers.
So here's another hypothetical. And this is just because I work with a lot of younger student people. What are some strategies to convince them to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's hard to like convince a 19-year-old to save for when they're 80.
Yeah. I mean, I would have them just maybe start with even just a savings account. I think people have to have a little bit of an interest. I also think for some people, if they have a job that is offering a 401k and the employer doesn't match, then they see, even if they leave that job, say they're in their 30s, 10 years later, that money, and they left it there, right? And that money, they put $2,000 away over working for this company for 3 years, and now that money is $20,000. And they're like, oh, I actually have some real money. I do think these things are very abstract unless people have some type of experience with it. So this is an argument for parents. Parents can also open a Roth account for your child. If your child is earning money, but they don't, again, it's coffee shop, summer internship, whatever, as long as they have earned income, you can put money in a Roth for them. I think people have to kind of see how things grow over time. So now you could do that with a checking account. I mean, a savings account that was earning 5%. Like even with cash, they might see, oh, if my money is saved, I'm actually making money. It's free money. I'm earning interest. It's money I didn't have to work for. I think people have to have some experience with that to understand that that can be powerful.
I agree with that. So just coming at it from the equity lens, right? Since we're working with Parge, if they don't have any experience with that, because their parents didn't have any experience with that,
Right.
then I feel like it just perpetuates the. So
Yes,
I don't know. I'm just
does.
asking all these hypotheticals for
I
people.
haven't, well, I haven't figured, I mean, this is why I'm doing all the work that I'm doing.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, the people who work with me have an interest.
Right.
I don't think you can convince people without the interest. Yeah.
I'm just coming, like I work with a lot of community college students who like trying to be like, as an artist, you should put $5 a month away. And they're
Right.
like, I can't even afford food.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm thinking about that listening to this, I guess.
I mean, I do that, I talk to a lot of art schools. I talk to a lot of colleges, community colleges. I work with summer programs here in New Mexico that are, people like 18 to 22. I mean, I think they have to be exposed. There has to be some education happening, right? This is the problem. There is no financial literacy education happening at any level in our society. Like for the most part, people don't get it in high school. They don't get it in college. It doesn't matter if you're an artist or you're not an artist, right? Like I always have artists tell me like, oh, I don't understand these things because I'm an artist. And I'm like, no, no one understands these things. My clients at UBS who had $10 million didn't understand these.